Arkansas State police pursuit that turned deadly this week. The driver, 30-year-old Torquilo Hambrick, has now been charged with first-degree murder after a passenger in the truck he was driving was killed when police pulled a pit maneuver to stop the vehicle. WREG investigator April Thompson has been digging into this case and has more on Hambrick, who is no stranger to police.
Torquilo Hambrick, now in a Prairie County, Arkansas jail after a high-speed pursuit with Arkansas State Police Tuesday. Police saying they pursued Hambrick's white Dodge Ram pickup for some 18 miles after he fled a traffic stop on Interstate 40 in Lonoke County. With speeds of up to 120 miles per hour, they executed a tactical vehicle intervention, or pit maneuver, near Hazen in Prairie County. When they hit the truck, it flipped and landed in a ditch.
The thing about tragedy is that it rarely knocks. It doesn't text first. It slips in quietly, turning an ordinary night into the kind you can never come back from. On the evening of March 25, 2025 in Arkansas, a mother, a friend, and a familiar face to many left for what should have been a simple trip. Within hours, their names would make headlines. One of them wouldn't make it home. And no one saw it coming, except maybe one person. This is the story of a woman who loved fiercely, laughed loudly, and lived with purpose. A woman who boarded a truck that night, unaware she was stepping into something far more sinister than she could have imagined. This is the story of Laterrika Woods. Welcome to True Crime Watch HD, where we explore the cases that deserve to be told, fully, fairly, and in depth. If you value stories that go beyond the surface, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon because this story will stay with you. Laterrika Woods wasn't famous, but she was unforgettable. A 29-year-old Memphis native, balancing motherhood with ambition, family with friends. She had style, charm, and confidence. A single mother raising her son while supporting her brother, an up-and-coming Memphis rapper many knew as Big Boogie. But Laterrika's story isn't about the spotlight. It's about what happened when the cameras weren't rolling. On that March evening, Laterrika joined friends for what everyone thought would be just another night out. A small group heading east on the open highway, making memories, taking photos, celebrating life. At least that's what it was supposed to be. It's easy to assume that danger is loud, obvious, impossible to miss. But often it blends in. It looks like laughter over dinner, music in the car, and plans for where to stop next. And sometimes the people closest to us are the ones carrying the weight of silent storms. Somewhere along the route that night, on a stretch of Interstate 40, something changed. A decision was made. Whether it was panic, pride, or something darker, we don't yet know. But what we do know is this. The vehicle, a white Dodge Ram, caught the attention of the Arkansas State Police. And before long, flashing blue lights filled the night behind them. What began as a simple drive home turned into something else entirely. Inside the truck were 4 people. Laterrika, 2 of her friends, and the driver. Now, who this driver is, and why this next decision will change all of their lives forever. That's something we will get to. But not yet. Because first, you need to understand why this wasn't just another traffic stop. Laterrika's mother, Khadijah Tucker, would later recall getting a call from her daughter that night. She said, "Mama, we on a high-speed chase." Imagine that. Your child calling you frightened, miles from home, their voice shaking. I told her, tell him to stop. But what Khadijah heard next would haunt her. In the background, a voice, firm, unyielding. I ain't stopping. And just like that, the call ended. And with it, so did the comfort of believing this night would end like any other. What happened next would leave families broken, friends mourning, and a city questioning how something so preventable could go so wrong. But to fully understand, we need to go back. Back to the man behind the wheel. Back to the decisions made, long before the flashing lights ever appeared. And back to the split-second choice that turned this drive into a death sentence. Who was driving that night? What really happened during the pursuit? And why has this case stirred outrage far beyond Arkansas? Because sometimes, it's not just the crime that's chilling. It's everything leading up to it. It began with the man behind the wheel. A man who should have never been there. His name is Torquilo Hambrick. You may have never heard of him before. But in the days after the crash, that name would circulate through every Memphis neighborhood, every Arkansas courthouse, and every social media feed that had anything to do with the case. Because once you start looking into him, you start asking a terrifying question. Why was he ever on the road to begin with? Let's back up. Torquilo Hambrick was 30 years old at the time of the incident. He had a history, not just of poor decisions but of documented violence. According to state records, his background includes multiple charges: domestic assault, aggravated robbery, drug possession, illegal firearm ownership, and a past conviction that would define how the public viewed this case moving forward. A sex offense that put him on the Tennessee Sex Offender Registry. That offense wasn't a minor technicality. It wasn't the kind of thing that gets brushed off with community service or forgotten in a few years. And yet there he was, driving free, carrying not only passengers, but a dangerous past. When Arkansas State Police spotted the Dodge Ram near mile marker 173, they initiated what they believed would be a routine stop. But to Hambrick, the flashing lights weren't just a nuisance, they were a threat. Because inside that vehicle, officers would later find more than just passengers. There were 2 firearms, a bottle of promethazine, marijuana, other unidentified narcotics, and a significant amount of cash. This wasn't a joyride. It was something else entirely. But here's where it becomes more than just a chase, more than just a crime scene. Because 3 women were inside that truck, and only one of them knew Hambrick well. That woman was Laterrika. One of the other passengers, according to her family, barely knew him. She had simply accepted an invitation, a ride home after what should have been a night of celebration. And now she was in a car flying over 120 miles per hour, with a man they were all begging to pull over. This wasn't just reckless. It was calculated. And according to Laterrika's family, the panic inside that car grew by the second. Her mother, who had received that final call, recounted the voice she heard in the background. "I'm not stopping," he said. They begged. They pleaded. And still, the driver kept going. It was around mile marker 191 in Prairie County that Arkansas State Police made a call. Officers deployed a tactical vehicle intervention, a maneuver meant to end high-speed pursuits by forcefully nudging the suspect's car into a spin. They struck the back of the Dodge Ram. At that speed, with a vehicle of that size, the results were catastrophic. The truck flipped, crashed, slammed into a ditch off the interstate. Inside, chaos. Outside, silence. Until the sirens. One woman was ejected from the vehicle. Another, critically injured, was flown to the hospital. A third, still conscious, would later undergo surgery. And yet, in the middle of all of it, with officers on scene, victims being treated, and lives hanging in the balance, Torquilo Hambrick pulled out his phone. From the back of a police car. Detained. He went live on Facebook. As if it were just another day. As if going live could somehow rewrite what had just happened. As if denial could undo the crash. In the live stream he claimed he was pulling over. He said the police hit him. But as we'll learn as the story unfolds, that narrative doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Because officers didn't just find drugs and weapons. They found truths Hambrick couldn't spin away. And while he was live streaming his version of events, paramedics were trying to save lives. One of those lives was already gone. But this isn't just about a chase, or a crash, or even a crime. It's about what happens when someone with nothing to lose drives with people who have everything to live for. A mother, a friend, a woman who still had photos to take, birthdays to plan, and a child to raise. And the question remains, did any of the women in that truck know what kind of man was behind the wheel? And if they had known, would they still have climbed in? Because justice isn't always as fast as a pursuit, and some wounds don't show up in police reports. If you are finding this story as haunting as we think, subscribe to True Crime Watch HD and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Tell us in the comments. Do you think officers made the right call that night? Or should someone else have stopped Hambrick long before the police ever did? This isn't just a crime. It's a tragedy that should have never happened. The dust had barely settled. The sirens had faded into the distance. But for those left behind, the noise was just beginning. Laterrika Woods was gone. A daughter, a sister, a mother, gone. And the question on everyone's lips wasn't just how, but why. Why was she in that truck? Why did no one stop him? And why did this have to end the way it did? As investigators pieced together the scene, it became clear, this wasn't just a traffic accident. The Arkansas State Police had their suspect in custody. Torquilo Hambrick was booked, facing the weight of decisions long past due. At first, the charges were typical of a reckless pursuit: felony fleeing, possession of firearms, possession of controlled substances. But as officers opened that truck, the gravity of what they found shifted everything. Inside they recovered 2 loaded firearms, a bottle of promethazine, marijuana, additional narcotics, and a stack of cash. Yet even more chilling than what Hambrick was carrying was what he was carrying inside himself. The background check confirmed what many feared. Hambrick had been on law enforcement's radar for years. His record wasn't a sheet, it was a scroll. Dating back to 2012, he had racked up charges for aggravated assault, domestic violence, drug trafficking, unlawful possession of weapons. But the most disturbing entry? Hambrick was a registered sex offender, convicted of a crime that the public would later struggle even to speak aloud. And on the night of the crash, he wasn't just violating traffic laws. He was in direct violation of his probation, a warrant for his arrest already active. So when the lights flashed behind him, Torquilo Hambrick wasn't running from a traffic ticket. He was running from everything catching up to him. But the women in the truck, they weren't fugitives. They were friends, daughters, mothers. And by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The crash might have been the end of the chase, but it was the beginning of a storm. Because almost immediately, attention shifted beyond Hambrick to the Arkansas State Police themselves. The maneuver used to stop Hambrick, the PIT or Tactical Vehicle Intervention, wasn't new, but it was controversial. Records revealed Arkansas State Police had conducted 553 vehicle pursuits the previous year. At least 6 had ended in fatalities. And multiple families had already raised concerns over the department's pursuit tactics. Critics argued that the maneuver, while effective, often resulted in deadly consequences, especially for passengers who weren't suspects. Supporters, including the Arkansas State Police, pushed back. In a public statement, Colonel Mike Hagar defended the action. Fleeing suspects are terrorizing and traumatizing our communities. Our troopers will not and cannot look the other way. But for Laterrika's family, it wasn't just policy. It was personal. Days after the crash, loved ones gathered at the North Fraser Community Center in Memphis. Candles flickered. Balloons, black, silver, and red, drifted into the night sky. Tears fell for a woman who would no longer tuck her son into bed, who would no longer laugh with friends, who would no longer call her mother just to say she made it home. Laterrika's mother, Khadijah Tucker, stood before a crowd and said through tears, "Y'all didn't have no heart for them other people in that car. They could have thrown spikes. They could have put up a roadblock. But instead they took my baby." Her voice broke as she pointed to the heart of the matter. "My grandbaby is 8 years old. He'll never see her again." Her words echoed through Memphis and beyond. And as the case gained national attention, another question emerged. Was this about a single man's recklessness? Or was it about a system too quick to escalate, even when innocent lives were inside? On the legal side, Hambrick faced more than just the initial charges. As authorities gathered evidence, they added first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree battery, possession of a firearm by a prohibited person. His bond was set at $1.5 million. To many it still didn't feel like enough. Because no sentence, no conviction could reverse what had been done. In the midst of legal proceedings, Hambrick himself seemed strangely composed. He maintained, even on social media, that he had been trying to pull over. Yet eyewitnesses, troopers, and even his own passengers contradicted that story. They said he accelerated. They said he refused. They said they begged him to stop. And as police pored over dashcam footage and witness testimonies, it became harder and harder for anyone to believe that this was just a misunderstanding. What's chilling is the silence before tragedy. The moments when people still believed this night could end safely. The trust placed in a driver who had already decided otherwise. Because it wasn't just the crash that killed Laterrika Woods. It was every second leading up to it, every decision Hambrick made, and every warning sign society ignored. At the heart of it all is a child. Laterrika's son, now left without the woman who, by all accounts, lived for him. No amount of legal proceedings will fill that gap. No apology will fix what was shattered. So where does that leave us? A family grieving. A city divided. A debate raging over how far police should go to end a pursuit. And a young boy, staring at the empty chair at the dinner table. What happened on Interstate 40 wasn't just the story of a pursuit gone wrong. It was the story of how violence, policy, and desperation collided in one horrifying moment. And it leaves us asking, how many more stories will end the same way? Before we change the script? Thank you for watching True Crime Watch HD. If you followed this story with us, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think justice has been served? Do you believe the system worked? Or is there more we, as a society, should be doing to protect people like Laterrika? And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because these stories matter. And we'll keep telling them until someone listens.